He built his legend on a single phrase, yippee-ki-yay, 3 syllables, a smirk, a gun. And for 30 years, that was enough. John McClane could survive anything. Skyscrapers rigged to explode, airports taken hostage, entire cities under siege. Barefoot, bleeding, outnumbered, and still standing. Bruce Willis didn't just play an action hero. He was the template. The everyman who refused to quit. The guy cracking jokes while the world collapsed around him. But the real Bruce Willis, the man behind John McClane, is now 71 years old. And the silence around him is nothing like a movie. What does it really look like when the man who played the world's most indestructible hero can no longer speak? And what happens to the people who love him when the silence becomes permanent? In 2022, his family announced he was stepping away from his career after a diagnosis of aphasia, a condition that impairs speaking and writing. By February 2023, that diagnosis had progressed to something more specific and more devastating: frontotemporal dementia, a disease with no cure, no treatment to slow it down. Reports from 2023 and 2024 indicate he has become largely nonverbal and no longer reads. The man who delivered some of cinema's most iconic one-liners can no longer find words for the people standing in front of him. His daughter Rumor, speaking in November 2025, said that traditional ways of measuring progress no longer make sense. The truth is, anyone with FTD is not doing great, she said. Chew, but he's doing okay in terms of somebody who's dealing with frontotemporal dementia. Doing okay. For a man who once outran explosions, that phrase carries the full weight of what this disease takes. This is the story of Bruce Willis, not the legend, but the man. A working-class kid from New Jersey with a stutter and a hunger that Hollywood almost never satisfied. A star who burned brighter than almost anyone in his generation. And a husband and father now living inside a silence that no one scripted and no one can undo. Before we go any further, if Bruce Willis ever meant something to you, leave a like right now. Not for the legend, for the man behind it. Stay until the end. Because the real story of Bruce Willis is not about invincibility. It never was. Walter Bruce Willis was born on March 19, 1955, in Idar Oberstein, West Germany, not because his family had roots there, but because his father, David Willis, was an American soldier stationed at a military base. His mother, Marlene, was German. 2 years later, when his father received his discharge papers, the family packed everything they had and crossed the Atlantic, settling in Carneys Point, a small working-class town in southern New Jersey, population barely 8,000. It was not the kind of place that produced Hollywood legends. It was the kind of place that produced welders, factory workers, and people who kept their heads down and their expectations modest. David Willis became exactly that. A welder, then a factory worker, feeding his family with his hands. Marlene worked at a local bank. They were not rich. They were not connected. They were ordinary people in an ordinary town, and young Bruce was their oldest child, carrying the quiet weight of that firstborn responsibility without fully understanding it. What made him different, and what nearly broke him, was his stutter. It was severe enough that he genuinely believed, as a child, that he was somehow broken. Social situations became minefields. Words that other kids tossed out effortlessly would lock in his throat, refusing to surface. He was nicknamed Buck Buck by his classmates, not cruelly, but the name stuck the way nicknames do when they point at something real. He was popular enough, funny enough, elected student council president in high school. But beneath the humor and the easy grin lived a boy who had learned to compensate for a voice that wouldn't cooperate. Then he found the stage. Something extraordinary happened when Bruce Willis stepped in front of an audience with a script in his hands. The stutter disappeared. Not gradually. It simply stopped. The memorized words flowed out of him clean and unbroken, and for the first time in his life, he understood what it felt like to speak without fear. "I thought I was handicapped," he would say years later. "And then I did some theater in high school, and when I memorized words, I didn't stutter. It was just miraculous." The stage didn't just give him a hobby. It gave him back his voice. And once he had it, he was never willing to give it up again. After high school, Bruce took the path his town expected. He worked as a security guard at the Salem nuclear power plant. He transported crews at a DuPont factory. He quit after a colleague was killed on the job, a moment that shook something loose in him, a reminder that ordinary lives could end in ordinary ways, without drama or meaning. He enrolled at Montclair State University to study drama, dropped out after his sophomore year, and made the decision that would define everything that followed. He moved to New York City with almost nothing. For years, he waited tables and tended bar, showing up to auditions whenever the schedule allowed. The city had no particular interest in a kid from New Jersey with a stutter and no connections. Rejections accumulated. The off-Broadway roles that came were small, forgettable. But behind a bar on the Lower East Side, Bruce Willis was studying something more valuable than any acting class. He was studying people. How they moved when they were nervous. How they laughed when they were sad. How ordinary men talked and held their glasses and carried their exhaustion home at the end of a long shift. He was building John McClane without knowing it yet. The break came in 1985 when he auditioned for a television series called Moonlighting, a comedy drama that needed a wisecracking detective to play opposite Sybil Shepherd. He was one of roughly 3,000 men who tried out. He got the role. For 4 seasons, the show made him a household name, earning him a Golden Globe, and the kind of recognition that turns a bartender from New Jersey into someone people stop on the street. But Moonlighting was a prelude, and the real earthquake came in 1988. Die Hard arrived in the summer of that year and rewrote the rules of American action cinema in a single weekend. John McClane was not a superhero. He bled. He cursed. He ran across broken glass in bare feet and screamed in pain doing it. He was scared, and he admitted it, and he kept moving anyway. Audiences had never seen an action hero quite like this. Flawed, physical, funny, and completely believable. The film grossed over $140 million worldwide. Bruce Willis became, overnight, one of the biggest stars on the planet. What followed was a decade that few actors in history have matched. Pulp Fiction in 1994, 12 Monkeys in 1995, The Fifth Element in 1997, Armageddon in 1998, and The Sixth Sense in 1999. Film after film landed, and Bruce Willis was at the center of all of it. Not as a one-note action figure, but as a genuinely versatile actor, capable of drama, comedy, and everything in between. The boy who couldn't speak without locking up had become one of the most recognizable voices in the world. He had earned every inch of it. And he had no idea what was quietly beginning to take it all away. By the early 2000s, Bruce Willis had built something that most actors only dream about: a career with no ceiling and a personal life that, against all Hollywood odds, actually worked. His marriage to Demi Moore had ended in 1998, finalized in 2000 after 13 years together, and 3 daughters: Rumor, Scout, and Tallulah. On paper, it was the kind of split that destroys families. In practice, it became something rarer and more remarkable. They stayed close. They co-parented with a generosity that their own children noticed and spoke about publicly. When Moore launched her memoir years later, Willis showed up. When their daughters celebrated milestones, both parents were in the room. "I still love Demi," Willis told Rolling Stone shortly after the divorce. "Our friendship continues, and the institution has been set aside." In a town built on rivalry and resentment, that was almost radical. In 2009, he married Emma Hemming, a model 23 years younger, in a quiet ceremony in Turks and Caicos. Together, they had 2 more daughters, Mabel, born in 2012, and Evelyn in 2014. 5 daughters across 2 families, and by most accounts, Bruce Willis showed up for all of them. He had said for years that being a father mattered more to him than any film. Those who knew him believed it. His career in this period was uneven, but still alive. The Die Hard sequels continued. He appeared in ensemble films, action franchises, the occasional surprise. A Broadway debut in 2015, stepping into a stage production of Misery at 60 years old, so proving he still had range and hunger. The public image remained intact. The smirk, the shaved head, the easy confidence of a man who had nothing left to prove. But something was shifting. Quietly. Almost invisibly. Emma Hemming Willis would later describe the earliest warning signs not as dramatic moments of collapse, but as small absences, silences where there used to be conversation, a subtle withdrawal from the lively, engaged man she had married. For someone who is very talkative and very engaged, he was a little more quiet, she recalled. At first, she connected it to the hearing damage Bruce had suffered during the original Die Hard shoot in 1988. He had fired a gun repeatedly beneath a table without ear protection, destroying a significant percentage of his hearing in one ear. When his language started changing, and it seemed like an extension of that, just Bruce, just the stutter resurging slightly, just age. His daughter Tallulah described the early signs differently, as a vague unresponsiveness that she sometimes took personally. The family chalked it up to Hollywood hearing loss, to busy schedules, to the particular exhaustion of a man who had been working constantly for 4 decades. What none of them knew, what no one yet had the language to name, was that the disease had already begun. On film sets, the signs were harder to dismiss. In the final 3 years of his acting career, Willis worked at a pace that seemed impossible to reconcile with the reports now emerging from those sets. He appeared in 22 low-budget action films in 4 years, earning as much as $2 million for 2 days of work, so often with no more than 15 minutes of screen time per film. The productions were nicknamed geezer teasers, a cruel but accurate description of films that featured aging action stars prominently in marketing materials while keeping their actual roles minimal. Willis featured in 8 such films released in a single year, 2021, earning him a dedicated category at the Golden Raspberry Awards for Worst Performance. What the Razzies did not know, and later retracted their nomination upon learning, was that something far more serious than disengagement was driving those performances. Crew members who worked alongside Willis during this period described moments that were heartbreaking to witness. On the set of Midnight in the Switchgrass in 2020, a prop master recalled a scene set in a diner where Willis, during take after take, appeared to genuinely believe he was in an actual diner. When she moved to refill his coffee cup between takes, he placed his hand over it and told her quietly that he didn't want any more. He was not in character. He had simply lost the thread of where he was. She played along, telling him he had ordered it, and the scene continued. She described the experience as heartbreaking. On the set of Hard Kill, also in 2020, Willis twice fired a prop gun loaded with a blank at the wrong cue, startling the actress playing his daughter in the scene. Directors began tailoring scripts to shrink his dialogue before he arrived. Production schedules were restructured so that all of his scenes could be wrapped before lunch. A longtime friend was brought in to feed him lines discreetly through an earpiece. On at least one occasion, Willis turned to the crew mid-filming and said, with complete sincerity, "I know why you're here, and I know why you're here, but why am I here?" That question, asked without irony or performance, may be the most devastating sentence in this entire story. The industry accommodated him. Productions adjusted. Nobody said anything publicly. And so Bruce Willis, the man who had spent 30 years playing characters who always knew exactly where they were and what they had to do, continued showing up to sets where, increasingly, he understood neither. The Golden Raspberry Awards created a special category to mock him. Journalists wrote about his decline in terms of laziness and disengagement. Audiences assumed he had simply stopped caring. None of them understood what was actually happening. His family did, and they were carrying it alone, searching for answers that would not arrive until March 2022, when a single announcement changed everything, and the silence that had been building for years finally had a name. On March 30th, 2022, a statement appeared on social media that stopped the entertainment world. Have you ever watched someone you love change so slowly that you almost missed it? Have you ever looked back and realized the signs were there, and no one knew what they meant? And have you ever wondered what it really looks like to love someone through something that has no ending, only a progression? Stay with us, because that is exactly what this next chapter is about. It was signed by 7 women: Emma Hemming Willis, Demi Moore, Rumor Willis, Scout Willis, Tallulah Willis, Mabel Willis, and Evelyn Willis. A wife, an ex-wife, and 5 daughters, the entire constellation of the man they shared, speaking in one voice because there was no other way to say what needed to be said. To Bruce's amazing supporters, and as a family, we wanted to share that our beloved Bruce has been experiencing some health issues and has recently been diagnosed with aphasia, which is impacting his cognitive abilities. As a result of this, and with much consideration, Bruce is stepping away from the career that has meant so much to him. The statement closed with a line that sounded like Bruce Willis himself, the kind of thing John McClane might have growled on a rooftop at midnight, half bleeding and still smiling. As Bruce always says, live it up. And together, we plan to do just that. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Messages poured in from actors, directors, fans, and strangers who had grown up watching Die Hard on Christmas Eve or The Sixth Sense in a darkened theater. Sylvester Stallone, who had worked alongside Willis in The Expendables, admitted in a later interview that they had fallen out of contact. Bruce is going through some really, really difficult times, he said. That kills me. It's so sad. His daughter Scout recalled the day the announcement went public. Yesterday was so surreal, she wrote. I'd hoped for some love and compassion. I truly never could have anticipated the depth and breadth of the love we received as a family. The word aphasia was new to most people. Neurologists explained that it was a language disorder, the brain's capacity for speech and comprehension breaking down slowly and without reversal. What they could not yet say publicly, because the family did not yet have a complete picture themselves, was where that breakdown was leading. 11 months later, on February 16, 2023, the second statement arrived, shorter, but heavier. Since we announced Bruce's diagnosis of aphasia, In spring 2022, Bruce's condition has progressed, and we now have a more specific diagnosis: frontotemporal dementia, known as FTD. Unfortunately, challenges with communication are just one symptom of the disease Bruce faces. While this is painful, it is a relief to finally have a clear diagnosis. FTD is a cruel disease that many of us have never heard of and can strike anyone. The family's words were careful and controlled, but one sentence cut through everything else. Bruce always believed in using his voice in the world to help others. We know in our hearts that, if he could today, he would want to respond by bringing global attention and a connectedness with those who are also dealing with this debilitating disease. If he could today, 3 words, and the entire weight of the disease contained inside them. Frontotemporal dementia does not attack memory the way Alzheimer's does. It attacks the parts of the brain that govern language, personality, behavior, and communication. The frontal and temporal lobes, the regions that make a person recognizable to themselves and to others. It is incurable. There are no treatments that slow its progression. The average life expectancy after symptoms begin is 7 to 13 years. For someone who had spent 40 years making his living with words, with timing, with the particular electricity of a well-delivered line, the cruelty of this specific disease was almost unbearable to contemplate. By 2023, those close to Bruce reported that he had become largely nonverbal. He no longer read. His daughter, Tallulah, writing in Vogue, described what those early years of change had felt like from inside the family. The vague unresponsiveness they had blamed on hearing loss, the way his silence had sometimes felt like withdrawal, like disinterest, like something personal. These days, she wrote, my dad can be reliably found on the first floor of the house, somewhere in the big open plan of the kitchen dining living room or in his office. He still knew his daughters when they walked in. He still lit up when they entered the room. That sentence, "he still lights up," became the one his family returned to again and again in the years that followed. Not as a measure of recovery. There is no recovery. But as a measure of what remains when language falls away. Connection. Recognition. The body's memory of love, even when the mind can no longer name it. Out in August 2025, Emma Hemming Willis made a decision she described as the hardest of her life. She moved Bruce into a separate one-story home nearby, staffed around the clock with professional caregivers. The house was chosen for its layout, single floor, calm, designed entirely around his needs. There were no stairs, no overstimulation. A serene environment built to meet a mind that was increasingly losing its ability to navigate complexity. The public reaction was swift and often unkind. Strangers on the internet interpreted the move as abandonment. Emma responded with a clarity and a firmness that reflected someone who had been carrying this weight long enough to stop explaining herself to people who had never held it. Everyone will have an opinion, she said, but if they don't have the experience of this, and they don't get a say, and they definitely don't get a vote. She had 2 young daughters, Mabel, 13, and Evelyn, 11, who had been tiptoeing through their own home for years. Children who could no longer have sleepovers, who could not bring friends over without managing the anxiety of how those friends might react, who had grown up faster than any child should. Bruce, she knew with certainty, would not have wanted that for them. He would want them to be in a home tailored to their needs, not his needs, she said. She visits every morning, every evening. Their daughters come several times a week for meals, breakfast, dinner, ordinary time. Demi Moore and her 3 daughters visit constantly. The house that was built around Bruce Willis's disease has not become a place of isolation. It has become, by all accounts, the opposite, a place where more of the people who love him can show up without the architecture of someone else's home around them. "It's opened up Bruce's world," Emma said. "More friends and family can have their own experience with him without it being my home, without me hovering." She described the house as filled with laughter, with warmth, with life. At the End Well conference in November 2025, she addressed the question of holidays. Whether celebrations still made sense, whether joy was still possible inside this disease. Her answer was immediate. "It's joyous. It's just different," she said. And then, with a smile that contained everything, "Life goes on. Dementia is hard, but there is still joy in it. We are still laughing." She added, almost as an afterthought, that Die Hard still counts as a Christmas movie. No, it was the kind of line Bruce Willis himself might have delivered. His oldest daughter, Rumor, speaking in November 2025, offered an update that said everything and nothing at the same time. Because with frontotemporal dementia, that is all there is to say. "The truth is, anyone with FTD is not doing great," she said quietly. "But he's doing okay in terms of somebody who's dealing with frontotemporal dementia." She talked about the moments of connection that no longer followed predictable rules. Her father might not recognize the context of a visit. He might not be able to speak a response. But when she held him, she said, he could still feel the love in the hug. Whether he knew who she was or not, the warmth was real. The body remembered, even when the mind could not. Emma published her memoir in September 2025. The Unexpected Journey. Finding Strength, Hope, and Yourself on the Caregiving Path. She wrote it, she said, as the book she wished someone had placed in her hands the day the diagnosis arrived. Not as a chronicle of Bruce Willis's decline, but as a map for anyone who has ever sat in a hospital waiting room and realized that the road ahead looks nothing like any road they had ever traveled. Demi Moore, appearing on CNN in December 2024, confirmed what the family had been saying for months in carefully chosen words. "He's in a very stable place at the moment," she said. "It's so important for anybody dealing with this to really meet them where they're at. Meet them where they're at." That phrase, quiet, unadorned, almost clinical in its simplicity, is perhaps the most accurate description of what Bruce Willis's life looks like now. Not where he was, not where anyone hoped he would be, where he actually is, in this house built around his needs, surrounded by the women who love him, in a life that looks nothing like the one he built, and everything like what that life, at its core, was always really about. He is not making movies. He is not delivering lines. He is not the man who ran barefoot across broken glass or quipped his way out of a hostage situation. He is a father being visited by his daughters, a husband whose wife shows up every morning and every evening without fail, an ex-husband whose former partner drives across town because that is what this family decided years ago that love looks like. And the voice that carried him from a New Jersey bar to the top of Hollywood is quiet now. But the room still lights up when his daughters walk in. There is a version of this story that ends with loss, with a famous man reduced by disease, stripped of the instrument that made him legendary, living in a house built around his limitations. That version is not wrong. It is simply incomplete. The fuller version looks like this: 5 daughters, 2 families, 1 ex-wife who shows up not out of obligation, but out of something that resists easy naming. Call it love. Call it the particular bond forged by raising children together through the years before anyone knew what was coming. A current wife who moved her husband into a separate home, not to distance herself from him, but to love him more honestly, to visit him every morning, every evening, as his wife, unburdened by the logistics of full-time caregiving, free to simply be present. A blended family that chose, long before any diagnosis arrived, to stay stitched together. And that choice, made quietly in the years of ordinary life, turned out to be the most important one any of them ever made. Bruce Willis built a career on playing men who refused to be defeated by circumstances they did not choose. Men who improvised, endured, and kept moving. There is something almost unbearable about watching that framework applied to his actual life. And something undeniably true about it, too. He did not choose frontotemporal dementia. He did not choose the silence. But the life he built before it arrived, the daughters, the friendships, the family that expanded rather than fractured after divorce. That was his. On every decision that created the room now filled with people who love him was once a deliberate choice made by the man who is no longer able to make choices of that kind. That is the thing about legacy that no biography fully captures. It is not built in the moments of greatness. It is built in the ordinary decisions to put children first, to stay close to an ex-wife, to marry a woman who would prove, years later, to be the kind of person who visits every morning without being asked. John McClane always found a way. Bruce Willis found something harder to write and harder to film, a way to be loved, fully and without condition, in the silence after the last line. If this story moved you, subscribe and leave a comment below. The people we remember are not always the ones who never fell. See, they are the ones who made sure someone would be there when they did. Bruce Willis never asked for your sympathy. He spent 30 years playing men who didn't need it. But the real man, the one behind John McClane, is living something no movie ever prepared him for. And the people holding him through it are doing so with a grace that deserves to be seen. If this story reminded you that the people we love are more fragile and more irreplaceable than we remember to say out loud, share it. Send it to someone you haven't called in too long. Let it be the reason you pick up the phone tonight. Subscribe to this channel for more untold stories about the lives behind the legends. Hit the notification bell so you never miss one. And if Bruce Willis ever meant something to you, if Die Hard was your Christmas tradition, if you quoted him in a school hallway, if you watched The Sixth Sense and felt the floor shift beneath you, leave a comment below. Tell us what he meant to you, because he can no longer tell the world himself, but we can.